Welcome to the Tuning In podcast, where we talk alignment, intuition, and our internal guidance system. We cover woo-woo topics in an approachable and practical way. I'm your host, Dana Evans of Alignful.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. This is episode 119. And today we are discussing a topic that I have wanted to talk about for a while, and that is the emotional hangover. Yes, you heard me right. The emotional hangover. Now, I'm curious when you pause and listen after I say that. I'm going to say it again. What comes to mind for you? So here I go. An emotional hangover. What comes to mind? Have you experienced this before? Is it something that you were aware of in the moment? Maybe you don't know what it means. Maybe it's confusing to you. Maybe you think, well, I know what a regular hangover is. But what's an emotional hangover? And we're going to talk about that today. So this topic comes up a lot. Obviously, the work I do, emotional feeling and clearing. I am an emotional support coach and guide. I am here to help you release unprocessed, old trapped emotions and then receive guidance through your inner voice about said emotions so that they can finally be freed from your body, freed from your system, and ultimately reintegrated into light. They're transmuted back to light because nothing is created or destroyed, right? It is just transforming and transmuting. And that is true with our emotions as well. There's a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about managing your emotions and controlling your emotions. And I'm not here for that. Just gonna say it, take my stance. I'm not here for that. I am here for emotional regulation, emotional rhythm, emotional allowance, emotional tolerance. I'm here for understanding your emotions and processing your emotions and even experiencing more emotions. Like, that is what I am here for, because that is what is a really confusing sentiment in our day-to-day society, is what it really means to have emotions and to deal with them. So today we're going to talk about a darker side of feeling emotions, and that is the emotional hangover. So what does that mean? How would I describe that? An emotional hangover is what happens when you have experienced a big emotional release or charge. And that hangover is, in fact, very similar to that of an alcohol hangover. At least from my experience, that's the similarity. And so you can imagine possibly what that feels like, and an emotional hangover can present itself in similar ways. That means you can feel really down the next day. You might feel exhausted. You might feel dehydrated. You might also feel extremely hungry. You might feel aimless or lost. You might feel even a little bit of embarrassment or shame from being really vulnerable and experiencing such an extreme emotional response. You might feel any range of kind of those lower emotions. Those can be the after effect of the emotional hangover. And this is absolutely okay. Here's why. When we go through an extreme emotional response, now, just to pause here for a second, I'm going to address this both in the sense of if you're going through an emotional response through guidance with me, right? With the support of a coach, with the support of your inner voice, like a almost like a controlled fall versus if you're really caught off guard and really thrown off and surprised by your emotional response. Either one can show, you can have a similar hangover from either one, but it might be more likely that you experience a more extreme hangover with the one that catches you off guard because simply you weren't prepared for it. But when you express an extreme emotion, when something moves out of you, moves through you, shifts and transmutes, that in itself takes a lot of energy. Think about it. Think about a breakdown, for example. How does that feel? Like if you have an emotional breakdown, we'll use that phrase for now, and you just snap and you cry, for example, and you're pouring out tears and you're like, right? Like the breath and the body. Think of all of the energy that goes into that. You're literally squeezing out what was inside of you. You're like juicing that emotion out of your body. That's why another side effect of an emotional hangover is soreness. That can come both from either physical, like the physical act of crying, or the physical act of holding, right? So the act of resisting an emotion comes from tension in the body. Tension in the body is a way that we resist an emotion. So if you're really angry or you're really sad or you're experiencing something that you're resisting, your body automatically will try to hold and help you keep it in. Like, thank you, body. We appreciate you. And we can sometimes end up being a little bit shut down or like a low level of numbness to that emotional experience. So when you break the dam, right, when you break down, when you allow the emotion to actually bubble up and come out fully, with that, there is a physical action that's required. And then the after effect of that is actually a physical release. So we go from holding from tension and resistance to like the active energy required to move an emotion to a release. So the day after that, even it can happen moments after. It's happened to me like almost immediately afterward. I'm like, whoa, my body is sore because all of a sudden I'm back in my body and I can feel these sensations, right? I can feel the tiredness of my muscles because they had been holding. And what's important to know about all of this is it's all okay. It's all natural. I'm yawning as I say that. That is a way that we move energy. But what's important also is to honor the hangover. Just like if you have a hangover from alcohol, your body is like begging you for things to help it regulate. And that can be the case with the emotional hangover. So if you're working one-to-one with me or in any capacity with me, like this is something we talk about, I can help point it out because I think there is, while in some ways having a big emotional clearing and release can almost immediately leave you feeling better, lighter, more energized, hungry, and excited. Like, I cleared that. It's like a load off your chest, right? It's this big relief. That's not always the case. And so sometimes your body is going to take longer to integrate this transition, right? So imagine you have this heavy emotional burden that's sitting and stuck in your body. And remember, these emotions, it's not just a one-time thing. So for example, if you, in the moment, say, if you're feeling that you can't express what you want to say, maybe to your partner. So maybe your partner says something, you want to rebuttal, but you're like, I'm not going to say anything. I don't feel safe. I don't want to upset them, whatever. Maybe as that happens, you feel like you're literally swallowing your truth. And that might show up as like some tension or a little aching in your throat. This is really common in the throat chakra. But that aching and tension isn't just because you swallowed your truth this one time. Because sometimes there's times to do it. It's not always the time to express yourself, right? Sometimes you want to wait for later. Sometimes it's not worth it for you, right? There's like always these different scenarios. But it's not that one scenario that is causing that ache or tension in your throat. It's actually all the times in your past that you've done this. So then you can zoom out and think of, gosh, all the times in my past from childhood on that I didn't feel safe or I didn't feel heard or I didn't feel like I could speak my truth and I had to swallow that feeling. All of those times where that emotion was suppressed or oppressed or dismissed or denied or ignored, whether it was from like actual, it was keeping you safe or just someone else in your life not letting you feel heard. Like there's a million reasons why this could happen. That's not the point. The point is that it happened. Every time that happened, it created an energetic misfire in the body and it got stuck. And every time a similar situation continues to happen going forward, it builds into that space in the body. And so all of a sudden, you have this achiness in your throat. And honestly, if this isn't really ever processed, this can manifest in physical symptoms. I mean, it happens all the time. Like our emotional charges that are unable to be expressed then start manifesting as physical symptoms because our bodies are begging us to express, to feel, to allow, to let that energy move out because it's stuck. So you imagine time after time after time that gets stuck and it builds up and it creates this energetic charge in that one area of your body. So then it's time to move it and to express it. And you start to go into that space. You start to breathe into that space and it brings up all these memories possibly, right? All these energetic times where you were no longer able to express and you start moving it and you start breathing and you hear your inner voice sharing what it wants you to know about this. And bit by bit, that energy starts to move out and it starts to expand and it starts to create space where there was once a holding ball of tension. And you might start yawning, right? And stretching your neck. Maybe you hiccup, right? Or burp. Or you need to hum. Like all of this is guided by your inner voice, this whole process. And all of a sudden, that one moment where you didn't speak your truth, you see it's not the one cause, but it's all the other times. And that's how they've built up. And that's why it's so important to start to release and to shed. Because once that moves out, there is space left. And it's in that space that we don't want to automatically fill with more of the same, right? So the body needs to integrate. So that's why sometimes the day after, or even a couple days after a big shift, a big release, you can feel really, quote, low. And it's really your body trying to integrate and regulate itself with this new experience in its physical form, with this new spaciousness in the throat, with this new awareness of what to do next time if you feel like you need to swallow your words. What to do instead. And that can take time. We're so rushed in this life. And while I find that the emotional clearing can have some immediate effects, we also need to allow for patience so that the body can integrate your new truth, your new experience. Because without the space to integrate, you will go back to your old pattern and then you'll rebuild up that area in the throat. So while the mind might associate the emotional hangover, which is why I use the term because we can so relate to that, while the mind might associate it with something bad or a problem, I would like to invite you to see it as a gift. That it's not that you're sad, or low. It's that your energy is now turned inward. We're so used to having that external, outward push of energy. That's the energy that's productive. That's the energy that's efficient. That's the energy that's effective. That's the energy that's social. That's the energy that multitasks, right? We're so used to that. And we're even taught to desire that as like, that's what we want all the time. That when we have something that is in contrast to that, it can lead the mind into fear of, oh no, something's wrong. I don't feel good. I don't feel energized. I did this big clearing yesterday, but I don't feel good today. What's wrong? Did it not work? But the truth is, life is full of waves. We're constantly needing to ebb and flow. And our emotional states, we ride the peaks, right? And the valleys, and then the calm stillness in between. And so when you hit a low point, I like to think of it as simply the energy is focused inward. And that is my reframe now. When I'm feeling low, which is, I actually use the word low, or I'm like, I'm in a low. I try to use that more than like, I'm sad. Something's wrong. What's wrong with me? I'm depressed. Like, those are what my mind would like to say. But instead, I like to say, I'm in a low. And low is slow. Low is slow. And in that space of low slowness is the time that your body is focusing its energy inward. So it still requires a lot of energy to process and integrate emotions. And even like the ripple effect, the after effect of any residual emotion that's left, that takes time and energy. So it's not that you're out of energy. It's just that your energy is working inward to support and integrate with what you've now learned. And with that, it just asks that you give it a little space, a little grace, and a little time. Because I know this to be true. On the other side of that is another upswing. Because once that energy is integrated, then that space is filled with light instead of the heavy, dense darkness of that emotion. And then you have that spaciousness within your body that you can then utilize as you move forward. That's why the 4-step process that I always use with clients is express, process, integrate, and regulate. Because we need all of those stages. If we only express our emotions without the other phases, well, that ends up a lot of times being like an emotional fight, like a beanbag fight. So we have our own emotions that are our own triggers. For example, if someone had a bruise on their arm and I didn't know about the bruise and I gently poked them in the arm, they may react and say, oh my gosh, that hurt my arm. Why would you do that? Whereas someone without that bruise wouldn't have that reaction, right? Because it was a gentle poke. And that poke creates that trigger, which creates that strong emotional response. If we aren't healing our own bruises, right? If we're not processing and integrating our own emotions and looking at them and feeling for where they're stuck in the body is constantly giving you signs, by the way. Your body is telling you day in and day out where it needs your presence and attention. The question is, are you listening, or are you saying, what's wrong with me? My knee hurts. What's wrong with me? Right? I feel nauseous. What's wrong with me? Oh, my throat is tight. What's wrong with me? Those are just invitations for your body to tune in. Yes, they can be physical. Maybe you tweaked your knee on a run. Maybe your body wants you to slow down. So you tweaked your knee on the run, but maybe you just tweaked your knee. That's fine. But the point is, if we can become more present to what our body is speaking to us, we can start to process our emotions more regularly. So if you're not doing your own emotional processing, where I started before that tangent about the body is, we end up having this beanbag fight. So if you can imagine your trapped emotions in your body as little beanbags, and if you're struggling and someone activates your beanbag, your tendency is going to be to throw that beanbag at someone else instead of dealing with it on our own. So it's like we're in a society that is in a constant beanbag fight. We're throwing our emotions at other people. We're projecting, we're emotional dumping, and we're expecting other people to walk on eggshells around us, fix our emotions, know what our triggers are, and do our work for us. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be compassionate people. But there is a missing link here in that we don't want our emotions, so we throw them outward because, again, it's neither created nor destroyed, right? I don't know whose that quote is, but Einstein or something. It is there. If I don't process the emotion that's stuck in my throat because I keep swallowing down my feelings, at some point, it's going to come up anyway. And I'm going to then emotionally dump and freak out on someone for something. Maybe it's the customer service agent on the phone, or maybe it's your spouse. They say one wrong thing and you freak out, and then everything that you'd been suppressing comes out. But the thing is, that can't be received. That in itself is the other form of emotional hangover, where if you haven't been integrating and processing your emotions along the way, you get these emotional outbursts, which can leave you feeling a little stunned and like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? And it can actually perpetuate the cycle of trying to trap your emotions and keeping them inward, because you're like, well, I don't have control over my emotions. Look at how I snapped. But my argument is that instead of keeping all the emotions inward or avoiding them, and then they come out in these bursts that really don't help you either, because you're not processing. When you're in an outburst like that, it's usually not an emotional processing that's going on. The mind can be very involved in that, and it's like projection and conjecture and attack. It can be very extreme. But instead, processing the emotions in a, quote, controlled environment, right, with the support of me, with the support of your inner voice, is a good place to start. Using your own tools, doing it alone in a place that is really safe for you to fully express yourself in the present. That is actually going to allow the emotions to have an outlet without them having to be thrown at someone else. And the beauty is, especially if it's, for example, with, a family member or a friend or a partner, that say you have been swallowing your feelings and you're not speaking up. Well, first to process your own emotions and the charge around that, then get the guidance from your inner voice. Then you can actually enter into a conversation with that person that is very clear, and you can communicate directly without all of the emotional charge that can often muddy a conversation. Isn't that cool? So the answer to not having emotional outbursts that can lead to like that type of emotional hangover is actually to be more present and to process your emotions more regularly. Then with the standard emotional hangover, when something big has processed, it's really just a reframe that and a reminder that your body is so wise, and it's just asking for some space and time so it can fully integrate, so that you can have full access to your energy again. And it's a really beautiful process when we start to honor the natural rhythms of the body, both with our emotional flow and also with our recovery. Your energy, I imagine, changes during the day, and different days and different weeks, you have different access to energy. And then the question is, do you honor that, or do you keep pushing through? Because that in itself can lead to other emotional charges, and it can lead to anxiety, which is basically a mask of all the deeper emotions that need processing. So in a way, I believe, and I've seen this with clients, the more anxiety you have, the more stuck you feel in anxiety, the more big, deep emotions that you have that need your attention. And as you start to release those deeper emotions, anxiety is kind of a mask. It keeps you in the mind. It's frantic, it's vibrating, it's not deep. The more you can drop in to the depth and presence of what's underneath that, the more the anxiety will naturally release its grip and soften. And one day you'll realize it's just not really there. I've had many clients speak to that, how they can just be more present because they're not stuck in the anxiety of overthinking of what will that person think and what did I say something wrong and what did I do, and worry and future predictions and all of that. But it's because they've done so much deep processing of their deep core emotions that haven't had the time of day, that haven't seen the light, that they can finally release the anxiety. So we frog leap the anxiety and get to the core of it, and the anxiety will release on its own. And all of that is such a beautiful process. And with the highs of like, wow, I feel light and free, I don't have the anxiety, I feel clear and present, there also are the lows of I need space to integrate, I need time, I need slowness, I need compassion and gentleness as my body gets used to this new level of spaciousness internally. Who am I when I'm not holding on to these deep, unprocessed emotions? Who am I when I am willing to step in and clear and release them so that they can integrate back to light? Who am I at my core? So I hope that was beautiful and helpful for your system. It is so natural to have an emotional hangover. And the better you get at doing this work and moving through your own emotions, the more stable your system will become and the more readily and easily it will integrate these upgrades, basically. So with that, thank you as always for joining. I would love to invite you to join my program called The Emotional Edit, which is coming in September. And I just have a waitlist right now, so put your name on the email list if you're curious to learn more, and you'll be the first to know. We go through the 4-step process of expressing, processing, integrating, and regulating your emotions. And we also use very practical, physical, real life examples to help with emotional processing. So we're working with your physical world and your emotional world and using them to support each other to help you safely and effectively release trapped emotions so that you can move forward with ease and without that baggage pulling you down, keeping you in anxiety or worry or fear. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the show notes, but it's alignful.com/email-capture. So I'm capturing your email address. And I am so excited for this program. I have a special little gift to the first 10 people who sign up for the program once the doors open. And we are going to get so juicy with our emotions, and you really will leave that month feeling clear and spacious and definitely having a fresh perspective on your own emotional spectrum. And learning, you'll have the tools from that learning of how to regulate your own emotions and how to process them on the fly so that they don't build up over time. So with that, thank you as always for joining. Next week, I have a really special guest interview coming out. I'm really excited to share that. I have a couple coming up and some other fun content. So stay tuned. If you know anyone who would love or resonate with this episode, please share it. I really get all of my listeners through word of mouth, so definitely share the episode with them. And you can also give me a review on iTunes if you've been a long-term listener. I would love to hear how this show has supported you. Until next week, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tuning In podcast. As always, if this would resonate with anyone you know, please share the episode. You can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans, or find me on my website at alignful.com.